Frank Dawson stood in the scorching afternoon heat, staring at an empty plot of dirt in rural Prachuap province, surrounded by nothing but dried grass and the distant sound of roosters crowing, and the horrifying realization slowly sank in that the resort he had invested $260,000 into did not exist and had never existed. The GPS coordinates that May had given him led to this barren piece of land with no construction, no foundation, no workers, no sign that anything had ever been built or would ever be built here. His phone showed their last text exchange from 3 days ago, her sweet words still visible on the screen. "I love you, my darling. Our dream is almost ready. Soon we live together forever in paradise." But now her number went straight to a disconnected message. Her line account showed no profile, and the woman who had called him every single day for 8 months had vanished as completely as if she had never existed at all. He was 62 years old, standing in a foreign country thousands of miles from Tampa, having sold his electrical business and his house to finance what he thought was their shared future, and all he had left was $43,000 in his bank account, and the crushing weight of understanding that the life he had dreamed of rebuilding was gone, stolen by a 23-year-old woman who had seen in him not a partner, but a payday. If you've been enjoying the stories I create, please consider hitting the subscribe button. Your support is crucial for the growth of this channel and helps me dedicate time to making these videos despite my commitment to a full-time job. Thank you for being here. Frank Dawson was not the kind of man who made impulsive decisions. For most of his 62 years, he had been methodical, cautious, and practical. Born and raised in Tampa, Florida, he had spent 38 years building his life one careful step at a time. He started as an apprentice electrician at 19, worked his way up through various companies, and at 35 finally scraped together enough money to start his own small electrical contracting business. Dawson Electric Services became known throughout Tampa for reliable work, fair prices, and Frank's personal guarantee that every job would be done right the first time. He married his high school girlfriend, Linda, when they were both 22. They had 2 children together, both now grown with families of their own. His daughter Jessica lived in Atlanta with her husband and 3 kids, while his son Marcus had moved to California years ago and rarely called. The marriage to Linda lasted 37 years, but the last decade had been marked by growing distance, separate bedrooms, and conversations that felt more like business transactions than intimate exchanges between partners. When Linda finally asked for a divorce 3 years ago, Frank was not surprised, though he was deeply hurt. She told him at breakfast on a Saturday morning, her voice calm and matter-of-fact, that she had been unhappy for years and wanted to spend whatever time she had left living for herself instead of maintaining the comfortable but loveless routine they had fallen into. The divorce was civilized and fair. They split everything down the middle. Frank kept the business, Linda kept the house they had lived in for 25 years, and they both walked away with their retirement accounts intact. At 59, suddenly single and living in a rented apartment, Frank felt like his life had been put on pause. The business was doing well, but it had lost its meaning. He was working not because he loved it anymore, but simply because he did not know what else to do. His children were busy with their own lives and rarely visited. His friends were mostly married couples who awkwardly stopped inviting him to gatherings once they realized he was single. The loneliness was profound and constant, a heavy weight that pressed down on him every evening when he returned to his empty apartment. He began reading about early retirement, about people who sold everything and moved to cheaper countries where their savings could stretch further and the pace of life was slower. Thailand kept appearing in these stories. Thailand, with its warm weather, low cost of living, friendly people, and thriving expat communities. The more he read, the more the idea took hold. Why stay in Tampa, working a business he no longer enjoyed, living alone in an overpriced apartment, waiting for his children to remember he existed? Why not start fresh somewhere completely different? After 2 years of research, planning, and agonizing over the decision, Frank made his move. At 61, he sold Dawson Electric Services to a competitor for $320,000. Combined with his savings and retirement accounts, he had approximately $550,000 to his name. It was not a fortune by American standards, but it was more than enough to retire comfortably in Thailand, or so he had been told. He gave notice on his apartment, sold most of his possessions, and stored what few sentimental items he wanted to keep in Jessica's garage. His ex-wife Linda thought he was having a breakdown. "Frank, you don't speak Thai. You've never even been to Asia. This is crazy." His daughter worried he was running away from his problems instead of dealing with them. His son Marcus barely responded to the email announcing the move, but Frank was determined. He was not running away. He was running toward something, toward warmth, simplicity, and the possibility that somewhere in the world there was still a chance for companionship and happiness. He booked a one-way ticket to Bangkok with a connection to Hua Hin, a coastal town south of the capital that he had read was popular with retirees. The night before his flight, as he sat in his empty apartment surrounded by the last few boxes, Frank felt a mixture of terror and exhilaration unlike anything he had experienced in decades. He was 61 years old and about to begin his life completely over. The next morning, he boarded the plane that would take him away from everything familiar and toward a future he could barely imagine. Frank arrived in Hua Hin on a humid evening in late September, exhausted from the 20-hour journey but alert with nervous energy. The taxi from the airport took him through streets lined with night markets, massage parlors, seafood restaurants, and hotels with neon signs advertising rooms by the hour or the week. Everything felt foreign and exciting and slightly overwhelming. The air smelled like fish sauce and diesel fuel and something sweet he could not identify. Motorcycles zipped past, carrying entire families balanced impossibly on their seats. He had booked a room at a mid-range hotel near the beach, a clean, air-conditioned space with a balcony overlooking the street. That first night, he stood on the balcony watching Thai families eating dinner at plastic tables below, listening to the unfamiliar tonal language mixing with laughter and the clatter of dishes, and felt simultaneously thrilled and terrified by what he had done. The first few weeks in Hua Hin were spent simply adjusting. The heat was brutal compared to Tampa. The food was delicious but sometimes sent his stomach into rebellion. The traffic patterns seemed chaotic and lawless. Nobody spoke much English outside the tourist areas, which made even simple tasks like buying groceries or getting a SIM card surprisingly challenging. But Frank was determined to make it work. He found a small apartment to rent for 12,000 baht per month, approximately $350, a fraction of what he had been paying in Tampa. The apartment was simple but comfortable, with a bedroom, a small living area, a basic kitchen, and a balcony with a partial view of the ocean. He bought a used motorcycle for transportation, enrolled in a basic Thai language class at the local library, and slowly began building a routine. He made a few acquaintances among the other expats, mostly retired men from England, Australia, and America who gathered at the various bars and restaurants catering to foreigners. They shared stories about visa runs, complained about the heat, and gave advice about which Thai banks were friendliest to foreigners and which immigration offices were the least bureaucratic. But despite these surface-level friendships, Frank was still lonely. The expat crowd was welcoming but transient, with people constantly coming and going. Most of them seemed content with casual companionship and no deeper connections. Frank wanted more. He wanted what he had lost with Linda, or perhaps what he had never truly had with Linda. He wanted a partner, someone to share meals with, to talk to in the evenings, to build a life with. One night, after a few beers at an expat bar, an Australian man named Dave mentioned an online dating site popular with Western men and Thai women. "Mate, if you're looking for companionship, that's where you'll find it. Just be smart about it. Not all the profiles are real, and not all the women are looking for love. Some just want your wallet." Frank went home that night and, after some hesitation, created a profile on the site. He chose a recent photo that made him look friendly but not desperate, and wrote a brief bio. Retired electrician from Florida, new to Thailand, looking for honest companionship and maybe something more. I enjoy quiet dinners, beach walks, and good conversation, not looking for games or drama. Within 24 hours, he had received over 30 messages. Most were clearly scams, generic messages sent by bots or by women whose photos looked professionally shot and suspiciously glamorous. But one message stood out. It was from a woman named Napasorn, who went by May. Her profile showed a simple, pretty Thai woman in casual clothes, smiling naturally at the camera. Her message was polite and modest. "Hello, Frank. My name is May. I work at hotel in Hua Hin. I see you are new here. I think you seem like kind man. I not looking for money or sponsor. "I looking for good man who wants serious relationship. If you want talk, I would like to know you." The broken English was charming rather than off-putting. Frank appreciated that she mentioned not wanting money up front. He replied, and they began exchanging messages. Over the next 2 weeks, Frank and May messaged back and forth daily. She told him she was 23 years old, from a small village in Nakhon Ratchasima province, and had moved to Hua Hin 3 years ago to work at a beach resort hotel as a receptionist. She sent photos of herself at work, in her receptionist uniform, standing in the hotel lobby. Everything seemed legitimate. She asked him thoughtful questions about his life in America, about his children, about why he had come to Thailand. When he told her about his divorce and his loneliness, she responded with empathy that felt genuine. "I understand feeling alone," she wrote. "Many people around but still feel alone inside. That is most sad feeling. I hope you find happiness here. Thailand can be good place for new start if you meet right people." After 2 weeks of messaging, May suggested they meet for coffee. Frank's heart raced as he typed his agreement. They arranged to meet at a cafe near the beach on a Saturday afternoon. Frank arrived 15 minutes early, nervous in a way he had not felt since his first date with Linda 4 decades ago. When May walked in, he recognized her immediately from her photos. She was petite, with long dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing a simple dress and minimal makeup. She smiled shyly when she saw him and approached the table. "Hello, Kun Frank," she said, using the Thai honorific. "Nice to meet you finally." They shook hands awkwardly, and then she sat down across from him. Up close, she looked even younger than 23, and Frank felt a momentary pang of self-consciousness about the nearly 40-year age gap between them. But May seemed completely at ease. They talked for 3 hours. She spoke slowly and carefully in English, apologizing frequently for her limited vocabulary, but Frank found her easier to understand than he had expected. She told him about growing up poor in a farming village, about her parents who still worked in the rice fields, about her decision to move to Hua Hin to earn money to send home. She described her job at the hotel, the difficult guests, the long hours, but also her gratitude for having steady work. When Frank talked about his life, his business, his divorce, and his decision to move to Thailand, May listened intently, nodding and occasionally asking clarifying questions. She did not seem impressed by his money or his past success. Instead, she seemed interested in him as a person. "You brave man," she said at one point. "Not easy to start new life in new country at 62. Many people too scared to change. But you do it. That shows strong heart." No one had called Frank brave in a very long time. The compliment touched him more deeply than he wanted to admit. When they finally parted ways, May touched his arm gently and said, "I have very nice time today, Kun Frank. I hope we can meet again soon." "I would like that very much," Frank replied, and he meant it with an intensity that surprised him. Over the following weeks, Frank and May saw each other regularly. They met for coffee, for walks along the beach, for simple dinners at local Thai restaurants. May always insisted on meeting somewhere public and never asked Frank to pay for everything, often insisting on splitting the bill or covering her own meal. This modesty and independence impressed Frank and made him trust her more. After a month of dating, May invited Frank to her small apartment. It was a modest place, a single room with a bathroom, sparsely furnished but clean. "I not have much," she said apologetically. "I save money to send home to family." They sat on her small couch, drinking tea, and May showed Frank photos of her family on her phone. Her parents in traditional farming clothes, standing in front of a small wooden house. Her younger brother and sister, both still in school. "Life very hard for them," May said softly. "I try help when I can, but my salary not much." Frank was moved by her dedication to her family. "You're a good daughter," he told her. That night, they became intimate for the first time. May was shy and gentle, and afterward, as they lay together in her small bed, she whispered, "I'm very happy you come into my life, Frank. You make me feel safe." Frank held her close, feeling a contentment he had not experienced in years. By the 3rd month, they were inseparable. May introduced Frank to her friends, other young Thai women working in the tourist industry, and they welcomed him warmly. May started talking about the future, about what it would be like when her work visa expired and she could no longer work at the hotel. "I dream one day to have my own business," she told Frank one evening as they watched the sunset from the beach. "Small guest house maybe, place for tourists to stay. I could be owner, make good money, help my family, but is just dream. Need too much money to start. How much would something like that cost? Frank asked, intrigued by the idea. May thought for a moment. Maybe 5 million baht for land and build small guest house. That about $150,000 American money. Too much for me. I never have that much. Frank did some mental calculations. $150,000 was a significant amount, but it was well within his means. And if they did this together, if they built a business together, it would give them both purpose and income. It would be something they created together, a real partnership. What if we did it together? Frank said. I have savings. I could invest in the land and construction, and you could run the business. We'd be partners. May's eyes widened. Frank, I cannot ask you do that. It's too much. You're not asking. I'm offering. I believe in you, May, and I believe in us. Let's build something together. May began to cry, covering her face with her hands. You are best man I ever meet. I cannot believe you want do this for me. Not for you, Frank corrected gently. With you. We'll do it together. That conversation marked the beginning of their shared dream. Over the next several weeks, May showed Frank various plots of land outside Hua Hin, areas where property was cheaper but still accessible to tourists. She introduced him to a man she said was her uncle, who worked in construction and could help them build affordably. They looked at blueprints for small guest houses, discussed room layouts and amenities. Frank felt more alive and purposeful than he had in years. This was exactly what he had come to Thailand for, not just to retire and fade away, but to build something new, to have a purpose, to have a partner. 3 months into their relationship, May suggested that Frank meet her parents. They want no man their daughter love, she said. In Thai culture, very important family approve. Frank was nervous but excited. He bought gifts for her parents, a thoughtful assortment of fruit, tea, and money in a red envelope, as May had instructed. They took a 5-hour bus ride from Hua Hin to a rural area in Nakhon Ratchasima province. May's family home was exactly as she had described, a simple wooden house on stilts, surrounded by rice fields. Her parents, both in their 60s, greeted Frank warmly despite the language barrier. May's mother prepared a traditional Thai meal, and they all sat on the floor eating together. May's father, speaking through May as translator, told Frank, "You take care, my daughter. I give you blessing. She good girl, work hard, help family. You good man, I can see. You have my permission for marriage if you want." Marriage. The word hung in the air. Frank and May had not discussed marriage explicitly, but hearing her father mention it made the relationship feel suddenly more real and serious. That night, staying in a small guest house in the nearby town, Frank asked May, "Would you want to marry me? I know we haven't been together that long, but I feel like I've known you much longer. I love you, May." May's eyes filled with tears. "I love you too, Frank. Yes, I want to marry you. I want we grow old together in paradise, just you and me." They held each other, and Frank felt a profound sense of rightness. This was his new life, his second chance at happiness. The next morning, May's parents invited Frank to a small ceremony at the local temple, a traditional Buddhist blessing for their future together. Monks chanted, incense burned, and May's parents presented them with symbolic gifts. Frank did not understand all the rituals, but he felt the weight and importance of what was happening. After the blessing, May's father pulled Frank aside, and through May's translation, said, "We very poor family, but you promise take care our daughter, and we trust you. If you build business with her, our family very grateful. Maybe we help work at guest house, help clean or cook. We want to be part of your success." Frank was touched by their humility and their eagerness to contribute. "Of course," he said, "this is a family business now." When they returned to Hua Hin, Frank and May began the process of making their dream a reality. May found what she said was the perfect piece of land, 3 rai in a developing area 20 minutes from Hua Hin Center. The price was 3 million baht, approximately $90,000. "Is good price," May explained. "This area growing fast. In 5 years, this land worth double, maybe triple." Frank hired a lawyer recommended by the expat community to review the paperwork. The lawyer explained that as a foreigner, Frank could not own land in Thailand, but there were legal structures that could protect his investment. The simplest was to put the land in May's name but create a loan agreement that gave Frank certain rights. "It's not perfect protection," the lawyer warned, "but if you trust her, It's workable. Frank trusted May completely. They had been together for 5 months now, and everything she had told him had proven true. Her family was real, her background was real, her love seemed genuine. He transferred $90,000 to May's Thai bank account to purchase the land. She registered it in her name, as legally required, and gave Frank a signed document acknowledging the loan and his investment. Next came construction. May's uncle provided an estimate, 2 million baht, about $60,000, to build a 6-room guest house with a small restaurant area. It was more than Frank had initially planned to spend, but May assured him the location and quality would attract customers willing to pay premium rates. Over the next 3 months, Frank transferred the $60,000 in stages as construction progressed. May sent him regular updates, photos of workers pouring concrete, framing walls, installing plumbing. Everything seemed to be moving forward exactly as planned. But then the updates became less frequent. By the 6th month of construction, Frank noticed that May's updates had become sporadic, where she used to send photos and videos several times a week. Now a week or more would pass between updates. When he asked to visit the construction site, May always had an excuse. "Better wait until more finished," she would say. "Right now just mess, nothing to see. When ready, we go together and you see finished product." Frank tried to be patient, but a nagging worry began to grow in the back of his mind. He had now invested $150,000 into this project, and he had not seen the actual site in person since the land purchase. May also seemed more distant. She was often tired, saying the hotel was especially busy and she was working long hours. Some nights, she did not come to his apartment, texting that she was too exhausted and would stay at her place. When Frank suggested visiting her parents again, she resisted. "They very busy with harvest season. Better we wait few months." Everything she said made logical sense, but the accumulation of small delays and excuses created a growing unease. Then came the final request for money. May called him one evening, her voice strained. "Frank, I have problem. Uncle say need more money for finishing touches. Furniture, air conditioners, decorations, another $50,000. I know is more than planned, but without this, guest house not complete." $50,000 more, Frank hesitated. He had already spent $150,000, significantly more than the original estimate. But what choice did he have now? If he did not finish the project, everything he had invested would be wasted. "Okay," he said reluctantly. "But this is the last amount, May. I need to see the guest house in person. I want to visit the site this week." Of course, May said quickly. "After you send money and we finish, we go together. I want you see our beautiful guest house. You be so proud." Against his better judgment, Frank transferred the final $50,000. His savings account now showed $260,000 spent on this project, leaving him with approximately $43,000 remaining from his original retirement funds. After the transfer, he called May to arrange a visit to the site. Her phone went to voicemail. He tried again the next day. Voicemail. He sent line messages. They showed delivered but not read. By the 3rd day, panic was setting in. He went to the hotel where May worked and asked for her at the front desk. "Napasorn?" the receptionist said, confused. "No one by that name works here." "May," Frank said. "Her nickname is May. She's been working here for 3 years." The receptionist checked the computer, then shook her head. "Sorry, sir. We have no employee named Napasorn or May." Frank's stomach dropped. "Are you sure? She told me she works here. She showed me photos." The receptionist looked sympathetic but firm. "I am sure, sir. Perhaps she worked at different hotel?" Frank stumbled out of the hotel, his mind reeling. He went to May's apartment. The door was locked, and no one answered his knocking. A neighbor peeked out and said in broken English, "She gone. Move out 3 days ago." The pieces were falling into place, creating a picture Frank desperately did not want to see. Frank spent the rest of that day trying to process what was happening. Every rational part of his brain was screaming that he had been scammed, but his heart refused to accept it. There had to be an explanation. May loved him. They were building a life together. This was all just a misunderstanding. He pulled up the GPS coordinates for the land they had purchased and hired a taxi to take him there. The drive took 40 minutes, leading him farther and farther from Hua Hin into increasingly rural areas. Finally, the GPS indicated they had arrived. Frank got out of the taxi and looked around. There was nothing. No guest house, no construction, not even a foundation. Just an empty plot of land covered in dried grass and weeds, surrounded by rice fields and a few distant farmhouses. "This is the place?" he asked the taxi driver in disbelief. The driver checked his GPS and nodded. "This is address you give." Frank walked across the land, his feet crushing the brittle grass. There were no signs that construction had ever begun. No building materials, no equipment marks, no discarded debris. Nothing. He pulled out his phone and looked at the photos May had sent him over the past months. Photos of workers, of concrete being poured, of walls being framed. Those photos had been taken somewhere else, at someone else's construction site. They had never been his guest house. Frank sat down heavily on the dusty ground and put his head in his hands. $260,000. Gone. Transferred to a woman who had never worked at the hotel she claimed, whose family may or may not have been real, whose entire relationship with him had been an elaborate performance designed to extract his retirement savings. He tried her number one more time. The call did not even ring. The number was disconnected. He opened Facebook and searched for her profile. It was gone, deleted, or blocked. Every digital trace of Napasorn May Kanchanapurn had been erased as thoroughly as if she had never existed. Frank went to the Thai police the next day, bringing every document he had: the bank transfer records, the loan agreement, the screenshots of their conversations, the photos she had sent. A police officer who spoke reasonable English took his statement, his expression growing more sympathetic as Frank explained what had happened. "I see this many times," the officer said when Frank finished. "Older foreign man, young Thai woman, promises of business or marriage. Usually money disappears. Can you get my money back?" Frank asked, though he already knew the answer. The officer looked through the documents. "This is problem. You transferred money voluntarily to her account. You signed agreement that say you give loan. She can say was relationship. You gave gifts. She owe you nothing. Very hard to prove fraud. But the construction photos were fake. She lied about everything. Yes, but prove that in court is very difficult. She can say miscommunication, change of plans, project, not work out. Unless we find her and she confess, very hard to prosecute. Can you find her?" The officer looked doubtful. "We will try. We put report in system, but identification she gave you may be fake. Bank account, maybe use relative's name or fake documents. These scam groups very professional. They disappear completely." Frank left the police station with a case number and very little hope. The officer had been kind but honest. The chances of recovering any of his money were essentially zero. He called his ex-wife Linda that night, something he had not done in over a year. He needed to tell someone what had happened, needed to hear a familiar voice. "Frank?" She sounded surprised to hear from him. "Is everything okay?" "No," he said, and then the whole story came pouring out. The loneliness, the dating site, May, the guest house, the money, the discovery, all of it. When he finished, there was a long silence. Then Linda said, her voice carefully neutral, "Frank, I don't know what to say. I'm sorry this happened to you, but you sold your house for a fantasy. You gave a woman you barely knew $250,000. I thought it was real. I thought we were building something together." "Did you?" Linda asked. "Or did you want it to be real so badly that you ignored every red flag?" Her words stung because they were true. Frank had ignored red flags, the age difference, the requests for money, the convenient excuses. He had seen what he wanted to see. "I don't think there's anything I can do to help you," Linda continued. "I'm sorry, Frank. I really am. But you made these choices." After they hung up, Frank sat in his apartment and took stock of his life. He was 62 years old. He had $43,000 left to his name. He was living in a foreign country with minimal language skills and no real job prospects. The retirement he had planned, the comfortable life he had envisioned, was gone. He could return to the United States, but to what? He had sold his business, given up his apartment. He would have to start completely over, and at 62, finding decent work would be nearly impossible. Social Security would not kick in for another 3 years, and when it did, the monthly payment would barely cover rent. His only realistic option was to stay in Thailand, where his remaining money would last longer. 2 years have passed since Frank discovered the empty plot of land where his guest house was supposed to stand. He is now 64 years old, living in a small studio apartment in Hua Hin that costs 8,000 baht per month, approximately $240. The apartment is one room with a bed, a small refrigerator, and a hot plate. The bathroom is shared with 3 other units. It is a far cry from the life he had imagined. To supplement his dwindling savings, Frank found work teaching English part-time at a local language school. The pay is modest, about 25,000 baht per month, roughly $750. Combined with his carefully managed savings, he survives. Just barely. He has become a cautionary tale in the expat community. Newcomers are told, "Don't be like Frank," as a warning against trusting too easily, against believing in fairy tales, against thinking that age gap relationships in Thailand are built on genuine affection rather than financial calculation. Frank accepts his role as a warning. He has stopped feeling ashamed and now tells his story openly, hoping to prevent others from making the same mistakes. He has met other men with similar experiences, though few lost as much as he did. They form an informal support group, meeting weekly at a cheap local restaurant to share their stories and remind each other that they are not uniquely stupid, just unlucky. The Thai police never found May. The investigation was officially closed after 6 months due to lack of leads. Frank has long since accepted that his money is gone forever, likely distributed among a network of scammers and impossible to trace. He thinks about May sometimes, wondering if anything about their relationship was real. Did she feel even a flicker of genuine affection for him? Or was every smile, every kiss, every tender word purely performance? He will never know. His children have gradually re-established contact. Jessica sends occasional emails checking on him, though their relationship remains strained. She was right to be concerned, and they both know it. Marcus has not responded to any of Frank's attempts to reach out. What Frank wanted when he left Tampa was a new beginning, a fresh start in paradise with someone who loved him. He got a new beginning, just not the one he planned. Instead of building a life with a partner, he rebuilt a life from wreckage. Instead of retiring comfortably, he works well into his 60s to survive. Instead of finding love, he found an expensive lesson about the difference between loneliness and wisdom. Frank Dawson sits now in his small apartment as evening falls over Hua Hin, the sound of motorcycles and Thai conversations drifting through his window. He is 64 years old, teaching English to teenagers for $750 a month, with $43,000 in savings that shrinks a little every month despite his careful budgeting. He did not find the paradise he was searching for. Instead, he found the reality that paradise, like love, cannot be purchased, no matter how desperately you want it or how much money you are willing to spend. On the wall of his apartment, Frank has taped a note to himself, written in the dark days after discovering the truth. You wanted to start a new life. You did. Now live it. And so he does. Not the life he dreamed of, not the life he planned, not the life he deserves, but the life he has. At 64, starting again with almost nothing, Frank Dawson continues forward because there is simply no other choice. If this story moved you, or if you know someone who needs to hear it, please consider subscribing to this channel. These stories are real, they happen every day, and they destroy lives that could have been saved with awareness and caution. Your support helps me continue documenting these cases and hopefully preventing others from falling into the same traps. Thank you for listening to Frank Dawson's story. Thank you for being here.